All right. I can tell you guys are gonna be lively this afternoon. Put you in groups, have you talk about things, that'll be great. Just kidding, I might have you talk to other people, but let's see if this works. Probably not. The speakers in this room didn't work during the fall, and they told me they fixed them, but I don't believe them. And looks like I'm just gonna have to tell you about Muhammad Ali being the greatest. Yesterday, I was talking about this in my other class because they're also doing the greatest assignment right now. And one guy goes, I hate Muhammad Ali. He's the worst. Dodged the draft, I guess. That was kind of didn't appreciate his social positions. Wasn't ideal. Anyway, we gotta take attendance and then we will get us.
Why do people argue like that based on like, that's not part of what he did as a boxer.
We weren't talking about him as a boxer already,
Oh.
I guess. We were just like, I was like, well, what I did was I opened up this PowerPoint presentation that we're gonna look at today, and on the first slide was this picture of Muhammad Ali because he famously, obviously said, I am the greatest. And so I thought it was a good place to start the class, you know? But apparently not. All right, so let's see who's here, who's not, so we can continue to think about this. We've got Brandon is here. All right, Michaela is here. Brendan. None of the Brendans. All right, Gabrielle, sorry, I'm learning how to read. Think I'd be good at it by now. Juliet is here. Nick's here, Amanda's here, Ruben's here, Janessa's here, Menley is here. Danielle, I saw, yeah. All right, Dallas is here. This is good, I'm like looking in some of the right directions. Hazel is here. Logan. Gavin, I was just talking to, yeah. Jacob, told me he wasn't gonna be here. Molly, no. Nolan. Ben Roethlisberger's corpse getting it done this weekend, or?
I hope so.
We'll find out. Amanda is here. JB, John, Claire is back there. McKenna, other Braden, or Braden, not, see, I've got it, Brandon, Brendan, Braden in this class. It's too much for me. I'll get it eventually, hopefully. Caitlin. Elsa told me she wasn't gonna be here because it's snowing. That was a Frozen joke. You guys would get it. Brooke is here. Irvin told me his car won't make it. Tristan, no go. Jaden, this is your first day here. No, were you here the other day? No, you weren't on my list, but I added you to Blackboard this morning. Here's the syllabus in that Blackboard shell. You know about Blackboard? I can bring this to you too. You will have the opportunity to see a 6-minute video that I think summarizes most of what we talked about on Monday. Everything else, we can either we'll schedule meetings if you missed your meeting with me, or I told you we're not gonna do it later this afternoon. At the end of class, we'll sign up for new times. Make sense? I just like to meet with everybody one-on-one, so I can go, how can I help you? Because that's part of my job. As we look at this, today's going to be geared towards the assignment you guys have to do for Wednesday. We don't have class Monday because of Martin Luther King Day. I encourage you to go to, obviously, the speaker and the other festivities that I have planned. I think that's very important. And as we work through this class, we're going to look at civil rights consistently. Although most people don't think about U.S. History to 1877 as a civil rights class. I mean, like, slavery is going to start in America in 1619, so we have some social issues to probably work through there. We'll also close the class. I'm sure our last lecture of the semester will be focused on the rise of Jim Crow in the American South, forerunner to any civil rights movements we might find. But you guys have had a couple of days to digest this and think about what we got going on in here. Anybody come up with any questions that we have about the syllabus or just about the class generally as we've kind of worked through this so far? We feel all right? I'd hope so. I hope you're not like freaking out. If you're freaking out, we probably got problems. All right, cool. Well, we got some things to do because if you were to hop over to Blackboard and take a look at it, as I mentioned, you are going to have an assignment due on Wednesday of next week, which will be the next time we see each other before you get here. And this assignment is pretty straightforward, and it's going to take what I'm going to talk to you about today, which are the 6 historical thinking aspects we're going to use throughout the course to look at all these different historical topics. And I want you to apply them to something that you know about. Maybe some of you think you don't know the history of anything, but I promise you, you're wrong. I don't care if you write about Pittsburgh Steelers related history, that Ben Roethlisberger's the greatest quarterback in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wouldn't be that hard of an argument to probably make. Notice I didn't say the greatest quarterback of all time, Nick. That's a different debate. Parameters and arguments, very important. And you're maybe going to learn that this week. But your first assignment is the greatest assignment. So you can roll under assignments here on Blackboard and find where this is. And basically it says, for the greatest assignment, consider what you know the history of. So this is what I want us to think about right now. I want you to just take a minute and go, all right, what's something I know about? And if I scroll down further, a lot of people will do like Nick, don't turn in the same paper as last semester, but you could write about why Michael Jordan's the greatest NBA player of all time. You could write about, I don't know, somebody in one of my class last semester wrote about who's the greatest stage production manager in the history of Broadway. I don't know shit about that, but like she had a very compelling argument and that's what she wants to do. I don't care if you write about who is the greatest athlete in the history of your high school unless you write it about yourself, because that's going to be like really weird, and that will be like, no, that is going to be kind of a weird semester. You could write about the greatest singer of all time. You could write about the greatest rock band. You could write about the greatest rapper of all time, and just like put out a good couple pages on Nas there. You could do whatever you want to do. Yeah, I know Nas is the greatest rapper of all time. We're going to talk about that later, Nick. Could be though. He keeps putting out albums. He put out 2 albums in the last month and a half. Seems like a lot of production for being in your 40s. What can you possibly have to say to the youth of today? We get the point. You can write about anything you want. Because the goal is you're going to take these 6 historical thinking skills we're about to discuss. These are the only 6 things you got to learn all semester. I mean, there'll be other content. You'll have to like practice them and get better at them. And as we go through this is going to prevent us from having to memorize a bunch of names and dates and some of these other kind of things, because I want you to be better big picture thinkers when you walk out of this class 15 weeks from now. So as we do this, it's to take this framework of 6 historical thinking skills and apply it to something you already know about, because everybody knows about something. All right, so think about it. Because if you have this in mind as you get started, it's going to make your life much easier. You want to do me a favor?
What's up?
Go to my office.
Yeah.
You know I got all the trays behind my desk?
Yeah.
In the top one, closest to the door, there's a stack of note-taking worksheets for this class. You know the ones with the boxes?
Yeah.
They're clipped together. The door's unlocked. Don't rob me.
I'll try not to.
Dave Greeter would know. He'd stop you, you know. David Greeter's the nicest human being on the planet. I don't know if you've met him before. He's not stopping a burglary, though. Maybe with like an ethical, moral argument. So, we've got topics in mind. Tell somebody about it. Like there's other humans. You have these things, they're vocal cords. Draw eyes.
My dad. I was going to talk about Keanu Reeves.
He's the greatest actor of all time?
I'm just going to say the greatest person.
Okay.
Because he's a genuine human being. He's nice. I can't just say the greatest nice guy.
That'd be the first person to ever make the greatest person of all time.
That is a weird,
Yeah.
don't say the greatest nice guy.
Everything he did.
Because
That's true.
I've already accepted that.
Yeah, and it is. When you think about it. Nice to meet you.
No, I was gonna.
Oh, really? I'm first. So, first. All right, we got him out there. Good. When Nick gets back, I'm going to give you a sheet. It's going to have a bunch of boxes on it. There's 6 of them. This is a sheet you're going to learn to probably hate. I think Ruben would back me up on that because I'm going to hand it to you quite a bit of the time. And I'm going to go like, hey, we're going to talk about this thing for the next hour. And then maybe I'm going to collect these from you and then like give you points for taking these notes. I won't do it all the time because I think you should just like take notes most of the time. We talked about this the other day. But it can also help you organize your thoughts in a way that's going to help you down the road, especially as we look at these topics on your midterm or final exam, because it's geared towards, we're going to have a bunch of blank sections on your midterm and final exam that correlate to this note-taking sheet. So if you have these and they're done well, makes it much easier to start to compose your thoughts and put them together. Yes?
Do you give them back or do you just take them?
Oh, I give them back.
Okay, fantastic.
This is why I'm a big binder person. Thank you, Nick. You didn't miss anything that important unless you like needed to talk to somebody around you about what you might do for this assignment. All right, so you can see this. I'm going to hand these to you quite frequently, especially early on in the course. Eventually I'll give up and go like, you can take your own notes, but I'll always bring them because maybe you'll just get used to doing this. There's 6 different boxes starting with historical significance, and then in italics they have the definitions of these 6 skills we're about to talk about the rest of the way. Anybody got any interesting ideas of things you're going to do for this assignment? Yes.
Aaron Rodgers is the greatest quarterback.
That's okay. There's an argument you can make there. Janessa, what are you going to do?
Probably he's cute.
Greatest author? Who's your pick?
There's too many right now. It's kind of
Narrowing it down, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman? No, I don't know. I'm a big John Steinbeck guy, but some people don't like Steinbeck. Too masculine. Gavin, what are you thinking about?
Barry Bonds, the greatest baseball player of all time.
Hey, steroids or not, that dude put a charge in baseball. I think performance-enhancing drugs should be legal in sports. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if I write about my president, which is a dictator? It's gonna be private, right? Like, you will only read this page.
I will only read it. You'll have to explain it to somebody else. Like, you'll have to be able to talk to someone else about the argument you put together. Does that make sense? So like, you could do that, but it might, I don't know. It depends on where you're gonna go into it. I don't know, does anybody have a lot of like really deeply ingrained opinions about politics in Turkmenistan?
No.
I mean, like in the rest of
I
them?
barely know it.
Sure, like people just learn a lot about where you're from that.
So we will be presenting to others?
Kind of. We're gonna line up all the desks and do cow timer speed dating. So like, you'll like rapidly talk about
Oh
this
my
with other
god, you still
people.
have that?
Like, it'll work if that's what you want to do, and it'll be fine. Or you can pick something else. I don't know. That's where, like, don't overthink it. It's very scary when somebody goes, do whatever you want. Many of you are in college, so you get this now. You're like, ooh, I'm probably not going to do the most productive things. Anyway, we got these skills. We got to get through them, otherwise we're in trouble. All right, so I'm going to hand these out, and these are meant today. Like, I'm definitely not going to collect these today, but you're going to be asked to do what? You're going to be take your own unique expertise, construct an argument of your chosen greatest, utilizing the aspects of historical thinking, and then it lists them all out. I want you to use quantitative and qualitative evidence from at least 3 sources to build this. What's quantification, Janessa? You're like, quit picking on me. Anybody else want to quantify something? Numbers. And then the greatest, this is easy to do, right? You go, well, Michael Jordan won 6 NBA championships in 6 tries. Fuck off, LeBron. You go every year and you still don't win half the time. Just kidding. I like LeBron too, but I'm a big Jordan person. A lot of times this is how we make arguments statistically, right? We go like, here's the actual evidence. Your Keanu Reeves argument's gonna take more than statistics. If you're gonna go Keanu Reeves is the greatest actor of all time, there'd be some box office statistics that'd be pretty tough, right? But you go like, that's where the other type, qualitative evidence comes in, the quality of something. So this would be like where I was watching a documentary yesterday while I was riding a bike in my basement, and like a lot of times people used to come in and go, Kobe Bryant was better than Michael Jordan. And I would provide them with all sorts of qualitative evidence. I would go, well, you know, in this documentary called This Magic Moment that came out in the ESPN 30 for 30 series, 3 times Shaquille O'Neal in a 2-minute span goes out of his way to call Michael Jordan the best player of all time. Now, there's some personal bias there probably, but also Kobe's first 3 championships, Shaquille O'Neal was the best player in the NBA. A guy got on the New York Times bestseller list named Shea Serrano. He wrote a book where this book makes the New York Times bestseller list. He spent an entire chapter talking about how there wasn't a season in Kobe Bryant's career where he was the best player in the NBA. It's very disrespectful. Sold a lot of copies of that book though. Quantification, qualification. Quantification, I need some numbers. Qualification, I need some kind of expertise, outside source, anecdotal evidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, are we going to be perfect at this?
No.
No, because we're here to grow. All right, so what does this look like? It's got to be 1,000 words, double space, Times New Roman size 12 font. If you don't know how to find out a word count, highlight the whole thing and it'll say the number of words at the bottom. You guys are pretty good with technology? I don't know, or Google it. It'll tell you how to do that same thing. So now, some examples of arguments people have made in the past. You can do greatest athlete in some sort of thing, playwright, musicians, whatever. There's a bunch of other directions here. Basically, what I want you to do is take whatever you've got, and then as we go through this, jot down some ideas of things that might go into you making this argument over the course of 1,000 words, which is about 2 pages. Does that make sense? All right, cool. This is like the far bank group. All right, so as we get into this, these skills, anybody, I know I have several who are my education major people. You guys are familiar with pedagogy, right? Amanda, what's pedagogy? Oh no, it's like how we think about like what we're going to teach people, the actual methodologies of how this works. This is where, as we go through this, we're going to use a thing to guide this course called Calder's Signature Pedagogy. Why do I tell you this? Because I think you're going to go home and be like, we're learning about Calder. No, probably not. But the idea that Calder's Signature Pedagogy for survey level history courses, I think works really well because it gives you kind of this toolkit of things you can use to study historical topics to see the big picture a little bit better. And so that's the things you have in those boxes on each one. And so as we do this, we're going to use this to guide our study throughout the semester. This is starting with kind of 6 aspects of historical thinking that are going to be the basis of everything we do in this class. Our lectures will be built around this. Your quizzes will be built around this. You need to use these skills in your assignments. It's part of the rubric. Your exams are very much this. Take one historical situation and run it through the 6 aspects, writing a paragraph about each. So again, like taking the notes in the boxes, not so bad. We'll check in, we'll get better at these as we work our way through. But this is why we're doing this. This is kind of some of the things behind it. I just like to give you guys an idea of why I choose to do the things that I choose to do in here. So the first thing you've got to think about, it's the bottom box on your sheet, but number 1 is think about evaluating evidence. So we talked about qualitative evidence and quantitative evidence. When it comes down to evidence, when you guys encounter sources, whether it be for this assignment or as we work our way through the rest of the course or just in life and generally, like when you come across something, one of the first things we have to do is think about, well, who wrote this? Who created this? What were they trying to accomplish by writing it or creating it? Who was their intended audience? And maybe most importantly, all those questions boil down to the idea of why should I listen to them? Does that make sense? We do this all the time. Like, this is one of the reasons I had to get off social media, because I was listening to too many people that I don't care what they think about American politics or sports or whatever else it might be. This idea of if you can start to think about why should you actually listen to other people, expertise is a real thing. There's a difference. I can stand up here and tell you that Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player of all time, or you can just watch The Last Dance, episode 6, where Kobe Bryant says without Michael Jordan, there's no Kobe Bryant. And you go oh, that's expert testimony from one of the other people in the mix. There's all of these kind of things where you start to look at expertise and value that and go, well, why should I be listening to this source? And that's one of the things we're really going to focus on this class, is this kind of informational literacy, where you guys are going to interact a lot with primary, secondary, and tertiary sources, and especially as you put those together. So in this, it's determining what sources are most accurate and applicable, and at the basis, it's why would I listen to these? So like in your assignment this week, this isn't gonna be as big of a deal. I'm not gonna care about like, if you're going to Baseball Reference and pulling out all the Barry Bonds stats and going like, for real, the guy hit 73 home runs one season. Tell me he wasn't great at baseball, or he's a 6-time All-Star before he even went to San Francisco. Like, would have made the Hall of Fame if he never did steroids. Not that he did steroids. It's never been proven. It's just his head got bigger that one time. That'd be nuts. Wake up one day, your hat size is like a quarter of an inch bigger. Think about the evidence you're bringing into the stuff you're doing. That's all I want you to be doing at the basic. Why do we do this? Why do I break it down into these 4 factors of validating evidence? Well, political, economic, social, and cultural factors I think are really important when we consider evidence. Because like if you think about like political factors, this will be more apt when we get into historical study, but in anything, the idea that like an action-related government policy and its administrative practices, we know politics and people's political positions, we were talking about this earlier, change how they're going to present different information. If you don't believe me, just hop on down to your local DNC office or your local Republican Party office and pick up a pamphlet on gun control. They will not say the same things, I promise. So we get it. Economic factors are going to be important for us because I think they can provide us with some quantification. In your greatest assignments, sometimes commercial success is the way we determine the greatest something, right? If you were going to talk about a musician, you might want to talk about sales of all time. Now, if you're talking about greatest author of all time, James Patterson or like Tom Clancy or whoever has sold the most books, probably not it. Jesus Christ. He didn't, I don't know if he wrote the Bible, Nick. That's another class we got to call reader. Economic factors are important for us studying history, though, because of this. There's a Latin phrase, cui bono, who benefits. That shapes historical outcomes a lot of the time. The idea that when you stand to gain something, whether it's economically, financially, whether you stand to gain in your own business, whatever this might be, that's going to influence how we make different decisions. Social and cultural factors, also very important to us. We're going to look at them together a lot because we look at these definitions, how people organize their relationships in groups, establish beliefs, values, traditions, laws, and languages. A lot of times those two things intersect. Ruben, did you eat lunch today? No. Gavin, did you eat lunch today? Who'd you eat with?
Myself.
Damn it. 0 for 2. Amanda, you eat lunch today? Anybody eat lunch today and sit with somebody in a program they're in? Like a teammate?
Would you count half a box of Cheez-Its as lunch?
Okay, so a lot of times if I go to like a sporting event, like if I went to the basketball game tonight, if anybody goes, if it happens, given the snow, maybe they made it from tickets in North Dakota already.
Pretty sure they did.
Oh, they're already here. They're hanging out at the Northwood Casino. Be an alright place to be. A lot of times, if you walk into the Waldorf gym during any sporting event, you will see clusters of people that are grouped kind of along similar lines. Like a lot of times, you see baseball players with baseball players. That's kind of what I was getting at. It's easier to form your social relationships into groups of people that you form some kind of similarities with that usually fall along cultural guidelines. Because like, it's sometimes much easier to get along with people if you have established beliefs. Certainly easier if you speak the same language. Like, it'd be really weird if I just started giving my lectures in Spanish and you had to sit there and just go like, I don't know. But, right, see, it would be fun. No, maybe not. Irvin would be hyped. He's not here today though. This idea of like how people establish their relationships in groups, if you have similar values to people, it's easier to align with them. These are going to be important for historical study because they also determine different types of evidence. If you like, if my Aunt Karen wrote a pamphlet on abortion, it would look very different than if my sister wrote it. They have very different stances on those things. Maybe you know people that are very evangelical. I think we get it. So as we take a look at this, just consider that like we're going to look at some of these things together. We're going to get better at this as we roll through. Our next skill, and when we think about this, I just want you to keep in mind this basic point of evidence builds credibility, and I want you to be thinking about what types of evidence can help you build your greatest argument. Be thinking about that quantitative evidence, that qualitative evidence, those kind of things that will allow you to hopefully pull in the expertise of other people to make your argument a little bit stronger. The other thing we got to think about with evidence that like those factors are supposed to help us address is, well, first, anybody know who this is? Guess don't know about the greatest American songwriter of all time?
I don't know. I was gonna make a stupid joke.
His name's John Clocky.
John Clocky.
Clocky does play the guitar, I think.
Yeah, but like being the greatest.
The greatest sword fighter, greatest wooden sword fighter all time. I'm gonna post this in the Blackboard shell later too. Nolan's gonna send it to me. It'd be terrible. This is Conor Oberst. How can you guys not know who Conor Oberst is? He started the band Bright Eyes when he was 14 years old. He toured around the Midwest while starting Saddle Creek Records and releasing his debut album, Letting Off the Happiness. 17 more albums have followed. He's the greatest. He's not the greatest. He's my favorite. For real though. One of the things we want to think about is our own personal biases and everything we're talking about this semester, but also in this. Why do you want to consider biases? Because you're much better at arguing if you can think about what points other people are going to make and then cut their knees out from below them. I mean, that's part of it. The other part is like the more self-aware you can be and go like, well, here's how I see the world. Here are some of the biases I have. Here's some of the things. You're going to eliminate some of these blind spots. And it's okay to like confront arguments and ideas that are different than what you believe. Because like, I don't know, to paraphrase Aristotle, he said the mark of enlightened mind is to like get exposed to other ideas and then still be the person you are. That's fine. We're gonna confront a lot of weird stuff in here over the course of the semester. A lot of difficult topics, a lot of things that you guys are gonna have different positions from each other. You'll have different positions from me on, I'm sure. I mean, like if I survived JB's dad, we'll be fine. See the world in different ways. I think that's safe to say. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I do know. But this idea that like, when you think about this, I just want you to consider your own biases. Like if you build a LeBron James argument and you don't address any of the counter arguments that I'm gonna make, it's gonna be really awkward when we're sitting across from each other on Monday, Wednesday, whenever, and I'm ready to just like lob grenades. Just kidding, I'm not gonna like get in a huge argument with any of you. But, does this make sense? I just want you to be thinking this is different because I can't read another Ariana Grande as the greatest like musical performer of all time argument, because there's a difference between what your favorite is and what the greatest is. Does that make sense? Qualification. All right, so we're going to talk about agency next. Agency and contingency is our next skill, the ability of a single individual or group to shape the outcomes of specific situations. The easiest way to think about this is to consider what would have happened differently within a given situation if that person wasn't there. So like, it's really easy sometimes. You go like, well, how would Kobe Bryant's legacy be better if Shaquille O'Neal wasn't there? Well, I don't know. They traded Shaquille O'Neal and then the Lakers didn't make the playoffs the next year, so tough. The Bulls got bounced because Scottie Pippen, trash. It's my least favorite Chicago Bull of all time. He wrote in a book that came out like a month ago that he was better than Michael Jordan. It made me read the whole book though. I bought it and read the whole book just to see how he put it in context. I thought it was like a hot take that somebody was doing, and I like to get context for things. No, he really just came out and was like, oh, I'm better than Michael Jordan.
What, was he the same guy that's friends with Kim Jong-un?
No, that's Dennis Rodman.
Rodman.
Both played NAIA basketball. Shout out to the National Association for Intercollegiate Athletics. Both made the NBA. Both played on 3 Chicago Bulls championship teams. I think about this in a lot of different ways. The easiest way I think for us to get this is like, can you guys imagine in your mind, this is one we're not going to share, a time where you made a bad decision and it came back to bite you in the ass? It happens to me, I think, every single day. I mean, not like big ones, but like sometimes I could think of some big ones too probably in my life where I went like, ooh, the decisions I made directly led me into huge problems. Some of you are going to do this because anybody just love to procrastinate things. This class will break you, like Rocky IV. Because there's work due every single week, but it gives you a chance to set a routine, maybe work on that skill, grow as a person, move in the right direction to where you realize like, if you got to do the shit anyway, you might as well get it done and then not stress about it because then you're happy later. Free time that you can enjoy instead of waking up at 3:37 a.m. going, oh no, why do I do this? Anyway, historical agency, we can see agency in ourselves, right? People matter in history in the same way that they make decisions and things happen differently based on those decisions that they made. My 202 example is always Martin Luther King Jr., right? We remember this. Birmingham, Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, bus boycott. we gotta go earlier, but it's MLK Day on Monday, right? Yes, you're like, you guys gotta go to the thing. I always think Martin Luther King Jr. is how I think about historical agency, because when he was leading the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, very early in the kind of swing of the American Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s, he's just a young 26-year-old that had just gotten his first job at a seminary after he had went first to high school in Atlanta, then eventually went to Morehouse, which is an HBCU, where he was able to be an exceptional student. And when he graduated from Morehouse, his dad, Martin Luther King Sr., called Daddy King, wanted him to come back and take over Dexter, or Ebenezer. I'm mixing up the two churches in two different places, Nick. Dexter Avenue Baptist Churches in Alabama. Anyway, Daddy King had built a major church in Atlanta that's still incredibly significant today. And he wanted his son to come take over what he had been building. You know, that's a cool thing in life. You hand something down to somebody else. That's a legacy some people want to create. And he really wanted his son to come take over the church. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, no, Dad, I want to go north to another university that's going to be integrated, and I want to go to seminary, and I want to be able to test if I'm actually smart outside of this HBCU system. And so he went north. He was a very good student, graduated, and again, when he finished seminary, his dad said, come back, take over the church. He said, no, I'm going to go try to get a job. And he got a job at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, the heart of the Jim Crow South during that time period. And just kind of a young guy. Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat. Everybody in town goes nuts. No, this is an oversimplification. And Claudette Colvin tried to not give up her bus. It's a whole thing. Take 202, we'll talk about it probably. But everybody comes together from the black community in Montgomery, Alabama, and they decide we're going to boycott these buses starting on Monday. And all of the different ministers in town start arguing with each other about who's going to be in charge. And ultimately they come down to, they go like, well, this guy's like 26, so if he's in charge, we can all kind of tell him what to do, and it'll be kind of like a screen to run things through. And like, it was Martin Luther King Jr., so like it turned out differently than they thought. But that's not even the important part. Although we can see agency there, because like the nonviolence that Martin Luther King Jr. is going to bring to the civil rights movement is important. That Mahatma Gandhi kind of philosophy of we're going to practice civil disobedience, and we're willing to take the risks of being attacked, being jailed, which like major fear in America. Also like as African American living in the Jim Crow South, being put in a southern jail sounds terrifying. To do that willingly, that sends a message about what you believe about something, probably. All of those things aside, I was thinking about historical agency with Martin Luther King Jr. because very early on in the bus boycott, he's inside of his house. His dad's come from Atlanta with his mother. He's got a young baby in the house. He's got his wife, Coretta, is asleep upstairs, as well as his mother, as well as the child. Him and his dad are arguing at the kitchen table, talking about, come back and take over the church. Martin Luther King Jr., I told you, Dad, I'm here doing this thing. And while they're debating this late into the night, somebody throws a bomb onto his porch that explodes. And I've always thought about this. The idea that like, how would I respond differently in that situation? If you kicked my door in, I'd shoot you. I promise. I got guns off. No, I'm just but this idea of like, I know I wouldn't have responded like that if somebody threw a bomb onto my house, because how he responded is all of these people poured out of houses throughout the neighborhood and gathered in front of his house. This huge crowd comes together. They're out for some kind of justice, whether it be street justice or otherwise. And Martin Luther King Jr. has the peace of mind to come out and do something different than I think most people would do if somebody threatened the life of his wife, his child, his parents. He comes outside and he puts his hands up and he tells people like, no, this isn't how we're going to go about it. And it's a paraphrase, but he comes out and he says like, we're going to continue to boycott these buses. We're going to continue to build a movement on nonviolence. And you can see him in that moment, like walking the actual walk instead of just talking the talk. Because we all have like things we want to do. And like sometimes agency comes down to like people making decisions in moments that are different. And that's what influences the outcomes of history. And that's what I want you to think about. Like, how would it be different if the person wasn't there? Because people matter. Like even the littlest of us all. Agency and contingency. This can also be groups. This is important because we're going to talk about this when we talk about progress and decline here in a minute, because we got to be able to take these people in groups and talk about how they feel about continuities and changes. What are continuities and changes? Oh, no, we'll come back. Institutions, ideas, and things evolving over time. Continuities are things that stay the same. Changes, things that are different. It's a radical idea, right? When we talk about these in this class, I want you to think about these as objective. These have to be the facts as they are. I know sometimes, like if you get on the internet and you go too deep down the rabbit hole, it starts to seem like down is up and up is down and no facts are real. But like things do happen in reality, and we have to be able to agree on some of the facts, right? When we beat Dickinson State later tonight and they have to like slock off into the snowstorm and you're just gonna go like, well, at the end of the day, they can't just like show up at the game tomorrow and be like, we won last night at Waldorf. There are things that happen, and we've got to be able to determine them. And that's how we're going to think about continuities and changes. I want you to think about these as objectives, so what stayed the same, what was different. And when we think about this, we can start to combine these skills together. All right, so follow me, we're making a jump here, right? We just talked about agency and contingency, which was people and groups. We talked about objective continuities and changes. Now we're going to talk about subjective progress and decline. This is a trap a lot of people fall into in this class generally, or just kind of mistaking what your vision of progress is as the only progress that exists. But I can promise you, in virtually every situation, there are historical agents, whether they be people or groups, that feel that any continuity or change is progress or that it's decline. Major trap people get into in my other class, not this one where we talk about civil rights for a while, is they'll get to the final exam and they'll get to the progress and decline section. They'll be like, ooh, I've really not done anything on the rest of the test, but civil rights, progress. I got this down, progress. It's great. Civil rights are good for everybody because they like everybody feels more valued and there's more equality in society and whatever else these people are like writing onto this test. I promise you that the Ku Klux Klan in Montgomery, Alabama in 1963 did not think the civil rights movement was progress. I'd actually bet there are people that were there that still don't think that the civil rights movement was progress. They view it as a decline. So we think about progress and decline. When we're talking about these positive and negative things, this is going to help us with perspective and the idea that you can go like, if you guys, we have the continuity, where we have our continuity or change, I don't know, we have a fact. You guys are going to beat Dickinson State tonight. After you beat Dickinson State, progress for us, because the Warrior Nation's strong. Decline for Dickinson, because they have to ride a bus for 10.5 hours back to the end of the earth. Think about how they lost in the Hanson Fieldhouse. If some of you haven't been to Dickinson, North Dakota yet, you'll go maybe.
I don't want to go to North Dakota.
Dude, North Dakota's great in the summer. Don't go from September to June. So think about this as positive and negative outcomes of historical continuities and changes. Does that make sense? When LeBron won the bubble title, decline for me as a Jordan person. Made my argument harder to make. It's one title closer. Barry Bonds broke the home run record. I was not sad. I didn't care about that point. I just thought he was very good. You could be neutral maybe in progress and decline. You're like, eh. Which is what some of you will do with many of the topics we discuss in this class. You can assign them to other people. It's not all about you. Does this make sense? Can we use this? And you start to see how we can link these things together, where it's like if you identify your groups and people, and then you can identify those continuities and changes, then it's easy to go like, well, this person thought of this as progress, and this person thought of it as decline. I know it sounds basic, just wait. 6 weeks from now, when you've really got this down and we're using this framework and you get good at it to be confident, you're gonna be like, Jesus, stop. We're gonna use this to study all the things this semester because I wanna give you a familiar framework to work from as we talk about all of American history, starting with like Indigenous America. Like, there's not even gonna be an America for the next 6 weeks of this class. Borders are made up things, Nick. You already know. You guys ever go to a border? This summer, after I had walked from the Mississippi River at Keokuk to Spirit Lake in the Minnesota border, it took me 371 miles to arrive at the Minnesota border, and I just started hopping back and forth across the imaginary line. But I'm not sure I was on the line, because how do you know where it is? Historical significance is easy. Why do we care? Easiest way to think about it. how events are relevant and important to modern scholars. Why do we care today? How does a historical event still have relevance today? What kind of is our big takeaway from it? On your greatest assignment, this should be pretty inherent, right? Like, there's a Barry Bonds, like, who's very significant, historically significant to baseball. He represents an entire, probably spans two eras, is one of the best players in both. Whatever, you can make all these different arguments. This will be really important when we get into our actual historical content. Because when you guys think about it, we're going to cover 3 different things a week pretty much in this class. I got 3 lectures a week. You guys are going to choose from 2 or 3 questions, and you're going to pick the things and choose to study those as you come into your assignments on Mondays. But as we do that, why are we spending time on it where we can talk about virtually anything in the history of the United States up to 1877? Why do we put emphasis? There's a value judgment there, and that's what historical significance is. Our last skill. See, we've almost made it. Empathy and moral judgment. Name the movie. I need like music. I got no sound in this one. It's a famous American novel that you probably read in high school. Yeah, it's enough to get you there. To Kill a Mockingbird. Why is that up there? Well, because when I think about empathy and moral judgment, I always think about that Harper Lee, the classic American novel that many of you were subjected to in high school, To Kill a Mockingbird. She wrote, well, and Atticus Finch said, or says in the movie, to really understand another person, you have to get into their skin and crawl around for a while. And this is a big thing. This is the last skill on purpose because I think it's like the most difficult thing to do. And we talked about this a little bit the other day. Like, I can try to empathize with you. I can try to understand. Like, I've never even been to Turkmenistan, let alone do I know what it's like to live there, grow up there, and then come here to the center of the universe, Forest City, Iowa, and go like, what is happening? I don't know. Shoot, I don't even know what it's like to play like high school football. 7th grade, I was like, fuck this, I'm out. They were like, offensive line. And I said, I'm going to be hurt for the rest of the year, and then quit the team. Wasn't for me. Too soft, Ruben. What do you do? This idea of empathy, like, this is a thing we are doing worse, I think, sometimes. We're developing more of a mass culture. This is a personal take, so umbrella of mercy, right? My personal take is like we're developing more of a mass culture, so we expect everybody to like have the same experience as us, and then we're much harsher on other people when we actually judge the things that they're doing. I think we gotta like be able to, in like politics is where you can really see this, because people go like, I don't need to talk to that person because I don't agree with their viewpoints, and we can't coexist. I think like if, this is again what we were talking about earlier, we're having a good conversation. This idea of like, if you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, maybe you start to see their position on things. It looks different from where you're at. If you're at Dickinson State, I'm sure they want to crush you guys tonight. They've been playing bad. No, they've been playing better. Valley City's been playing bad. Tomorrow they'll really want to crush you. This idea that like, when we consider how people in the past think and how, in relation to how we think today, empathy is a huge part of this. The idea that like we can look at things in the past, and in this class, trust me, we're going to talk about like, I shouldn't, but I know at one point in time after this, like again, umbrella of mercy, I'm going to refer to George Washington as old slave teeth because he made a set of dentures out of enslaved people's teeth. And I think that that's fucking wild. And I can't help it. It just pops up in my brain. I also think like Washington, and without his historical agency, we probably don't win the American Revolution. And he's also the first president, and there's redeeming things that he did. People are complex. People are imperfect. As my grandfather used to say from the pulpit, like, unless you're Jesus Christ, we've probably all sinned. I don't know. I have weird beliefs. You guys will figure that out sooner or later. But this idea that when we consider this imperfection in other people, have you guys ever had anybody build you up in ways that just terrify you? Like, this happened, well, I used to do this, like my high school girlfriend I did this with too. I thought she was just perfect. I was wrong. But the idea, when we kind of put these expectations on other people, or people put them on us in particular, this makes it really difficult to actually see people as they are. And so one of the things that we want to do historically is like, we're not going to create these massive heroes. We're going to talk about people as real human beings that make mistakes or make value judgments or do other things. We're going to try to put ourselves in their shoes. And then, anybody really judgmental? Want to actually own it? I think everybody's kind of judgmental. And the idea that like we all do this in different ways, and I can promise you, like, the better you get to know people, the more complex your judgments will be. Some of them you'll be way harsher because you know. God damn it, I told you not to do that. But a lot of times as we get to know people better and we try to empathize with them, we can pass better moral judgments because we can go like, I see why you did the things that you did. That's my whole doctoral dissertation. I tried to spend 300 pages justifying why Ink Peduto was justified in killing 38 people at Spirit Lake because he had just watched his child starve to death because Americanization came to Iowa. Don't worry, we're going to talk about that next week. Well, actually, we'll probably talk about that in like 15 weeks, but we're going to talk about Native people a lot the next few weeks because, like, I don't know, American history was indigenous history for like thousands of years. Does this make sense? We can do this a little bit. In your argument for Wednesday, the way to think about this is to go like, oh, I can understand why somebody thinks LeBron James is good at basketball. I don't know. We got it down? We got questions. We can use these to build these. What questions do we have about stuff?
What was the slide for people judgment?
Historical significance. So this is kind of like that big why. Why events are relevant and important to all scholars.
I put that in the people.
Draw an arrow. It'll be good. Yes.
Does it need to be a person, or could it be like something that was?
I don't care. Yeah, you could write about almost anything. People have written about
My Endgame
like
is
cars,
the
like
greatest movie.
people write about, I don't know. Yeah, this gets to be really weird, but it's another mechanism for me to go like, oh, you're the person that wrote Pete Davidson was the greatest comedian of all time, and now I'm gonna like make fun of you for the next. No, I'm just
George
kidding.
Carlin.
Dave Chappelle. Controversial right now.
Hey.
But Chappelle's show. Anyway, when you think about this, I want you to consider this. What other questions do we have? Because if you have them, other people have them. I promise. We're good? All right. Have a good weekend. Stay safe out there. If you're driving somewhere, go support basketball and anything else happening on campus this weekend. And I'll see some of you in 10 minutes upstairs.
I thought you were rescheduling this.
The meetings.
Oh, you got something else?
I don't know. I have a class
Okay.
immediately.
I thought this was like the end class.
We can flip it around. If you do need another meeting with me, we'll figure it out today or we can do it next week. I think you were fine, and I'm going to take the video and post an announcement on Blackboard because I think this stuff we gotta like. be able
Speaking of the
to-
video.